life. So today I have a good news for you because you can by getting this knowledge, you can apply this in your life and you can rewire your own connection. So that is one of the main aspect of neuroplasticity. So I will get into the term neuroplasticity later, but before that, I will just give a brief introduction regarding the various neural networks as well as how our brain functions. So I will start my lecture by taking a quote from the father of neuroscience, Ramon Cajal. So according to him, every man can, if he desires, become the sculpture of his own brain. So according to our wish, we can modify our neural networks or our brain connectivity. So that is the main topic that I will be discussing today. So before getting into the details of the talk of neuroplasticity, I will just give a brief introduction regarding human brain. So as you all know, like human brain is really complex and it has a lot of connectivity, and it is, according to the Society for Neuroscience, the most complex living structure in the entire universe. And the complexity comes in the number. So you have 100 billion nerve cells, and to make it more complex, each nerve cell can form 10,000 different connections. So the total number of connectivity goes to 1 followed by 15 zeros. So that many connections gets established in our human brain. So it's like a million billion connection. And if you see the distance it covers, it is around 3.2 million. So that is like the distance that is from Earth to Moon and returning back to Earth and winding the Earth around 6 times. So that much long distance it can cover if you connect one neuron behind the other. And all these connections makes us who we are, or our personality is made up by all these connections that are established in our brain. So we have acquired a lot of neural networks or new connections throughout our life journey. And these connections, if they perform at a continuous rate, it is around 20 million billion. It can do around 20 million billion calculations per second. So it's like a multi-trillion maze of connections. So you can imagine the capability of our human brain. But actually, to be frank, we are all underutilizing the network that we are having, because you have the basic concept of neuroplasticity is to understand yourself, understand your network and how we can modify the network. So the basic functions of this is to cover like the basic functions of the brain, because there are a lot of people who do not have a background in the area of neuroscience. So I just thought of including so many basic slides. So this is one of the slides which tells you the different functions of human brain. So it is involved in thinking and cognition, then it is involved in sensation and perception, and all the emotions that are coming out in your system are also part of the network that is formed in the brain. And it controls all the different organs in your body. Apart from that, all the motor coordination. That means if you want to move your hand or leg, the message has to come from the brain. And if you summarize the entire behavior as well as all the functions of the body is regulated by the master organ called the brain. So if you just like divide based on the functionality, we can divide the brain into forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. So forebrain has several structures which are more advanced in the case of human beings. So you will see the majority of the brain is made up of cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex is involved in high-end mental functions, your intellectual capabilities, language processing, and most of the memory and voluntary movement are also controlled by the forebrain. And you also might be knowing that the brain is divided into two hemispheres, left and right. And And these left and right hemispheres are connected by bundles of neurons. So those are called the corpus callosum. And then you have thalamus, which is like a relaying station. And then there is limbic system, which is involved in the emotional processing and also the processing of short-term memory and intellectual processings. So there are two areas which are really important, or like for the emotional memory as well as for the intellectual memory. So there is an area called amygdala, which controls your emotions. And there is another area called hippocampus, which is involved in the consolidation of short-term memory. And most of the motor signals are coordinated by an area called basal ganglia. So this basal ganglia network projects to the motor cortex, and from motor cortex, it is conveyed through the cerebellum to the spinal cord. And the other, so these are the main parts of forebrain. Then you have midbrain, which acts as a relaying station. From connections from forebrain are conveyed to the hindbrain through the midbrain. Attention and state of alertness and arousal. Then the hindbrain is the area which is important for all the vital functions. So pons is important for sleep and wake cycle. Then cerebellum coordinates your movement and keeps the balance. Then medulla controls heart rate, breathing. So most of the vital functions of the body are controlled by hindbrain, and hindbrain is seen almost in all the lower vertebrates. So this is like a brief introduction about the entire organization of brain. So now we move on to the most complex area or most developed area in the case of human. So that's the cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex, based on function, we can divide into 4 parts: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. And as I discussed, cerebral cortex is the most enlarged area or the most developed area in the case of human brain. And it is considered as the seat of the most complex thoughts, and intellectual processing or high-end intellectual processing are done in the cerebral cortex. And we can divide cerebral cortex into frontal lobe, which is important for planning and judgment. There is an area called somatosensory cortex, and there is also called an area called motor cortex, which are part of the frontal lobe. So the planning, judgment, and motor functions are part of the functions of frontal lobe. Then you have parietal lobe. So parietal lobe is involved in spatial recognition. So when you are moving in a tightly packed area, you adjust yourself because of this processing in the parietal lobe, and you are able to visualize many things about the universe and the solar system, and all those concepts are developed as part of the processing in the parietal lobe. And in Einstein's brain, around 15% of more connections were seen in this parietal lobe. And then you have the temporal lobe, so which is involved in the processing of memory as well as emotions. Then there is the main area is the auditory cortex, or you have the processing of all the auditory signals in the temporal lobe. And it is also involved in comprehending language. So there are 2 areas for processing language. Language initiation happens in an area called Broca's area, while the comprehension of language happens in an area called the Wernicke's area, which is located in the temporal lobe. And then the occipital lobe is involved in vision. So all your visual clues are analyzed in the occipital lobe, and it is also involved in the color perception. So next question is why these neurons are so important. So neurons are the basic units through which all those signals pass through. So they form the organized circuits in the brain. So if you see the neurons, it has a huge network of dendrites which receives the signal. And then you have soma or cell body where the signal is processed. And the processed information is conveyed across long axons. And these axons connects to the nearby neurons. And through this neural network, we are able to have these communications going on. So you will see that the neurons are electrochemical in function. So why do I call this electrochemical? So there is electrical signals across the axons, while when it reaches the synapses, it gets converted into electrical signals, gets converted into chemical signal, which is mediated through neurotransmitters. So what are neurotransmitters? So when it reaches the synapse, so synapses are small gaps between two neurons. So one neuron, we can call it as presynaptic neuron, and the other neuron, we can call it as postsynaptic neurons. And between these, it is not a direct connection. So there is a small gap of around 20 nanometers, which is really minute. And through this small gap, it is not electrical stimuli that is, or the electrical conductivity is not taking place, while there is the more chemical signal that is mediated through these neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are released into these synapses. So we call this gap as synapse. And these neurotransmitters are released into the synapse, and the postsynaptic neuron collects the neurotransmitters, and then again it converts the chemical stimuli into electrical stimuli. So first it is electrical, then when it reaches the synapse, the electrical signal gets converted to chemical transmission with the help of neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters reaches the postsynaptic neuron, where it gets again converted to electrical signal. And that's how the neuronal communication happens. So you might be wondering why you need a chemical signal. So you need fast conductivity. So then why not just having electrical conductivity? So the main drawback of electrical conductivity is that we won't have a control. So in the case of chemical synapses, so based on the neurotransmitters, you can modify the network. That's very important point when we are discussing about neuroplasticity. So what are these neurotransmitters? So before that, we will just have a look at how these neurons are connected in our brain. So you will see that axons from the sensory organs. So here they have shown the visual information. So the neurons from the eyes, which is the sensory neuron, gets into the and where the information, and there is a long, vast network of neurons where the conductivity happens. And when it reaches the synapse, the electrical conductivity gets converted into chemical transmission, which is mediated through these neurotransmitters. So this is a picture of neurotransmitter propagation. So you will see that there are a lot of different types of neurotransmitters. We will just go through a few of the neurotransmitters. So you might be familiar with neurotransmitters like adrenaline, which takes your body to flight and fight mode. So when we are stressed out, the adrenaline production happens a lot. And similarly, when we need to fight back, or when we are in a flight mode, when the situation is not favorable, the adrenaline secretion happens in the brain. And there is another neurotransmitter called noradrenaline, which is important for the contraction of blood vessels and also increasing the blood flow, which helps in the concentration, which helps in maintaining the concentration in the brain. You all might be familiar with dopamine. So that is one of the neurotransmitter which is important for pleasure, or when your body is gets some rewards, or when you are rewarded with something, your body gets that, or you get that pleasure feeling. And that pleasure feeling is given by dopamine. So when these reward pathways or reward centers are activated, there is a lot of dopamine release, which gives that good pleasure feeling as well as good relaxed condition for your brain. So next, serotonin, which is for your normal sleep pattern and for good relaxation. And also it is one of the neurotransmitter which is important for good well-being as well as providing happiness. So this neurotransmitter we can stimulate by regular exercise and also by getting exposed to sunlight. And there are few more neurotransmitters that I have listed here. One is GABA or gamma aminobutyric acid, which is the major inhibitory neurotransmitter. So GABA gives that calming effect because it is mostly inhibiting the synapses. So it also controls the of the brain. Then you also might be familiar with acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is important for learning and memory. So in the case of Alzheimer's condition, there is considerable depletion of acetylcholine in the brain. So that is important for learning, memory, as well as for muscular action. Then there is glutamate, which is the major excitatory neurotransmitter. So glutamate is important for normal development as well as it is for the fast conductivity. It creates more fast contracting or the conducting neurons, as well as it is important for learning and memory. Then you also might be familiar with endorphins, which are released during exercise, excitement, and sex. And also it gives that euphoria like feeling. And also it is involved in reducing the pain. So these are few of the neurotransmitters that are important for regulating the entire body's activities. So your mood and all the activities are mainly controlled by the secretion of these small chemicals in the brain. So now I have a small exercise. So this is just to get back to you, get back your attention. So you can just so you have 30 seconds. You can just focus on the number 19, and then within this 30 seconds, you can just start counting from 1 to 25, and you have to put your gaze on these numbers when you are counting. So starting from 1, you have to reach till 25. Are you ready?
Yes.
So nobody is responding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So your time.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Ready.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you have 10 more seconds. So you people can tell me till what number did you reach?
Yes, sir.
17.
Did you find? Okay, anyone else?
17.
19.
Okay. So these kind of exercise increase your, okay, so any about 20?
25.
25.
Okay, good. Your name?
25.
I'm 25 in Nepal.
Okay.
21.
So this exercise increases the reception and processing of information speed. And it also gives that peripheral vision. So when you're shifting from one task to another, these kind of attention loss happen. So when you practice such kind of small exercise, you can keep that concentration level. Okay, now we move on to learning and memory and what is plasticity. So as I discussed, so all these sensory inputs are collected by various sense organs or the receptors present in various sense organs. So the sense organs receives the information as sensory input. And this sensory input, whatever you receive, now you are receiving informations through your visual clue or through the eyes. Then you are also listening to me. So the auditory information is coming in. And then you have the sensory feelings by the receptors that are present in the skin. And all these sensory clues are reaching an area called the short-term memory processing area, which is the hippocampus. So that process is called encoding. So from sensory buffers or the sensory information getting transferred to the brain, and that entire process is called encoding. And the encoding happens in the hippocampal area. And this encoded information will be retained for a short duration. And based on your necessity or based on the strength of the stimuli, as well as based on whatever you are rehearsing. So if you are feeding this, there will be a lot of information coming into your brain. So there are around 70 to 80,000 like new thoughts that are coming in throughout a day. And very less information gets into the long-term memory. So that transfer of short-term memory to long-term memory happens through this area called hippocampus. So whatever you are rehearsing again, or whenever you are recollecting those information again, that short-term memory gets consolidated as long-term memory. So the consolidation of memory happens in the long-term storage area, which is cerebral cortex. And from cerebral cortex, whenever we require this information, so we might have learned many things earlier. Those memories are retained in the cerebral cortex. And when we are thinking about those information again, or when we are writing an exam, we are recollecting those information from the cerebral cortex. And that information comes back as working memory. And this working memory recollection is called the retrieval. And based on the efficiency of retrieval, your performance will be there. So short-term memory happens in the area called hippocampus, and those information based on your necessity or when you are rehearsing, those get consolidated into the long-term memory storage area, which is the cerebral cortex. And from cortex, it is retrieved back whenever you require as working memory, and that process is called retrieval. So during the development, you will see that this memory formation has both environmental influence as well as the role of genes. So role of genes starts at a very early time. So when you are in mother's womb, there are a lot of genes that are expressed. And there is also a process called neurogenesis that happens during the early time. So neurogenesis happens during the early stage of pregnancy to the late stage of pregnancy, and then it goes on to your around 3 years. So till that time, the neurogenesis happens. Neurogenesis is formation of new neurons from stem cells or progenitor cells. And after that, neurogenesis gets restricted to very few areas in the brain. And those are like subventricular zone lining the lateral ventricles and dentate gyrus of hippocampus. So those two are the main areas where neurogenesis continues in an adult. But main changes happens after this 3-year period due to the effect of neuroplasticity. So that happens during the critical period. So during this critical period, environment has lot of influence. So whatever like enriched environment or whatever condition the child gets during the early period, based on that the brain development happens. So during the early stage, during the first 1 or 2 years, the sensory informations gets coded. And after that, the motor information till the toddler level. And then higher cognition happens during the later stages of adolescence. And after that adolescent stage, when you reach the adulthood, it is mostly synaptic plasticity that can affect these or change these neural networks. So what is this neuroplasticity? So neuroplasticity is the ability of brain to form new connections and based on whatever stimuli that you are giving. So it can, the basic principle of this neuroplasticity is either you use it or lose it. So based on whatever information that you are feeding the brain. Some information is important based on your requirement, and only those informations will be retained. Other information gradually goes into the trace memory. So that ability of the brain to rewire itself, and that process is called neuroplasticity. And this neuroplasticity occurs throughout lifetime. And I will show you many examples in the following slides to address this point. So brain plasticity also is important when you get some head injuries or when there is a brain damage. Brain damage can be either through accidents or through neurodegenerations. So based on your stimuli, the neuroplasticity can be increased even during the late stages or even during the late adult stages. So neuroplasticity is important for retaining or making, for establishing new memories. And it also improves like the motor functions. And it can also be important for performing day-to-day activities, or you can efficiently do many tasks during your day or during your life if you are stimulating neuroplasticity. So now I move to the basic aspect of neuroplasticity. So I am quoting this like quote from Dalai Lama. So he told that just one small positive thought in the morning can change your whole day. So how a single positive thought can make a change in your brain? Have you ever thought of that? So when you are entertaining a positive thought in your brain, the first thing that happens is the change in neurotransmitter level. So when you're recollecting those positive thoughts again and again, there is more rush of neurotransmitters and there is more what we call as increased postsynaptic potential. And slowly there is changes in the plasticity. So there will be a lot of nearby neurons that gets attracted. And those nearby neurons also forms connections with this single neuron, or a small group of neurons will be there in the beginning, and there will be a lot of adjacent neurons that gets connected and form this network. And when you are practicing this thought again and again over a few days, there is small sprouting of axons that happens, or there are additional synapses that gets established. And later, it changes the entire behavior. So initially, it is just excitation of the neuron, then it influences the nearby neurons, and it strengthens the synapse. And when you are strengthening a particular synapse, if you want to avoid certain behaviors, that synapses gets down regulated, or that synapse gets gets into the trace memory, or it gets into the lower level of application. So you can stimulate a nearby neuron and you can inhibit the nearby other neurons that are in the periphery, which are involved in other behaviors. So in the later stages, there is sprouting of new axonal terminal, which leads to the structural plasticity. So after a few days, you will see that there are additional sprouting of axons or the sprouting of neurons that happens. And there will be additional synapses for that single thought. And finally, it makes a permanent change. So when you really want to make that change in the brain, you can practice it for 3 or 4 weeks. Then you will see that there is functional plasticity happening in the brain. And that makes or the changes your behavior, and that forms the character at the end. So this is how the strengthening and weakening of synapses happens. You can just see this video. You can see there are, for each thought, different neurons get activated. So there will be some strong connections. So these are the habits. So you can think about certain things, and there will be dedicated neurons for that. So these are the normal characters. So you can imagine that you wake up very late in the morning. So that pathway you can see in the white. So that will be a strong behavior in your system. And hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is it audible?
But yeah, there is some disruption in your voice in between.
Yeah, now it's audible. I believe it's audible right now.
Is it better? Now is it better?
Yes.
Yes, it's
So you can just So you can just imagine a habit of waking up late in the morning. So this is that strong behavioral character that is already there in the brain. So now if you want to wake up early in the morning, so that if you are practicing for one day, it will be a small network. And slowly, when you are rehearsing that again and again, that pathway gets stronger and stronger.
I'm not sure if this is happening with everyone. Sir, your voice is breaking.
Okay, maybe due to this video. So only when playing this video,
Yeah,
it is getting affected, no?
I believe, sir, it could be the bandwidth issues.
Okay, so it might be due to the video. So you can just see that the yellow is the new character that you have developed. And then, so then the old pathway of getting up late gets weaker and weaker when you're practicing waking up early. So that pathway gets into the system, and when you're practicing it for several or few weeks, then that gets into your character. And that's how you are changing the neural network. So you can just see this video, and then the old.
Sir, we lost you. We can't hear you. So maybe you can switch off your webcam while you are playing the video. That might help.
Okay, sure. Okay, then I will just turn off the webcam. Just 1 minute. Okay, so you might have here it is shown as two behaviors. So you can either get stressed when you get a thought, and that is the behavior that we want to modify. Then if you're practicing meditation and all, it will be really difficult in the initial phases because those connections are not established. But when you practice it regularly, those new networks will be formed in the brain. And due to that, your efficiency will increase and you will be carving out a new different pathway. And that's how you make a new behavior, and in turn it gets into your character. So I am going to show few examples of this neuroplasticity. So this is one of the study in London taxi drivers. So this is Meguer et al. In 1997, she did her study. She collected had contacted several taxi drivers, and their brain scanning was done, along with several control samples or control people were also collected for this study. And they did the brain scanning, and they could see that in London taxi drivers, they have to follow lot of route maps, and they by heart lot of London route, which are really complicated. And they had developed a strong network in the hippocampus. So you can see the experienced taxi drivers formed additional connections in their brain. So this was shown in the image as enlarged hippocampus. So this is one of the study that showed that by practicing regularly, you can enrich your network in the brain. And the next study that I want to discuss is regarding the aging and Alzheimer's. So this study was done by David Snowden. Here, he did this experiment in a group of nuns. And what he did was, he selected nuns based on their age, and all of them were above the age of 60. And one group was allowed to live their normal life. The second group, what he did was he provided enriched environment. And enriched environment means they were asked to sleep at particular time. They were given diets which were really good for the brain. And they were allowed to socialize more. And they were given a lot of the normal activities that are important for the brain functions. And this enriched group had almost all the conditions similar to the control group. So they had Alzheimer's like brain condition. So they had alpha amyloid plaques, and there were tau aggregates. All these things were, these are the characteristic features of Alzheimer's brain. And they could see this condition in both the control and the aged group. But the most important thing that he noted was, even though this enriched environment group had all these plaques in the brain, they did not show any symptoms of Alzheimer's. So generally neurodegeneration happens when your 50 to 60% of neurons are lost. So there will be only 40 to 50% of neurons left in the brain. So whatever neurons were left in this enriched environment group, those neurons had branched out and formed additional connections. So even though they had all the features of Alzheimer's brain, they did not develop symptoms because of the synaptic plasticity. Because they were provided with enriched conditions, they had several branches of neurons that was established from whatever neurons were left in their brain. So this, they had analyzed their brain capacity, and they could find that the most senior nun, her name is Sister Mary. She was around 101 years, and she was the top scorer in the cognitive test that they did. So you can imagine, even when you have a neurodegenerative condition in the brain, by inducing synaptic plasticity, you can overcome or you can nullify most of the effects. So you can make new connections and you can improve the brain networks by whatever neurons that are present in the brain. So this was one of the breakthrough experiments in the field of neuroplasticity. So next experiment that I am going to discuss is like a process of stimulating the motor movements. So here, the experiment was done by Pascal Leon in 1995. So he had categorized the groups into three. So one group was asked to play piano with right hand for 2 hours per day. So when you play piano with one single hand or the right hand, the left brain activation happens. So there are specific areas in the brain which gets activated. And the next group was untrained group, and there was another group which was allowed to play as they wished. So you can see the trained group, untrained group, and the control group. So those who were trained continuously for 2 hours of one-handed piano playing, he could note that their brain activation was much higher. So you can see the red colored activation signal that he collected. So those brain areas were highly activated in the trained group. So he could conclude that the structured goal-directed practice or continuous practice of motor movements establishes new network in the brain, and that makes the task much easier. So you might be familiar with learning of riding bicycle, familiar with like swimming, learning swimming. Initially it was very difficult because there was no assigned neurons for that. But when you practice that regularly, new networks are formed in the brain. And due to that, the task become much easier for you. So that is the goal-directed practice. So continuously when you are allowed to practice, new networks are established, and that makes the activity much easier. And the next experiment was much more interesting. So here in the second experiment, he asked the group of subjects to practice the exercise mentally. So just to play piano by giving the piano notes, and they were visually asked to imagine the playing of piano. So each and every step of piano playing, they visualized in their mind without even touching the piano. And the other group was given normal piano to play. And you can see that those who did physically did the piano playing compared with one who practiced mental visualization. Almost the activation was similar. So you can see that just by visualizing what the activity that you are doing, there is a huge number of network that is getting built in the brain. So that is the power of visualization. Just by visualizing, you can increase the synaptic plasticity. So this was one of the breakthrough experiments where they could prove that thinking is doing. So which uncovered the fundamental link between thought and action. So that's why we plan the experiments, or whenever you are doing something, if you are planning it properly by just visualizing everything, that becomes much easier. So that is the power of mental visualization. So now you have just a small exercise. So these are finger gestures. So you can just so this
Sir,
is
we lost your voice.
okay. Can you hear now?
Yeah, now it's audible.
Okay, so whenever I am playing the video, the audio is
Yeah.
lost. So this is
Right.
this is like a activation of two hemispheres of the brain. So you can just keep victory sign in one arm and the super sign in the next arm, and you have to shift this pattern. Can
So we can't hear you.
So can anyone try this? So you have to shift the fingers victory sign to the left and then again back to right. So these signs has to be switched across the hand. And you have to do that initially in, it takes a little practice to get that into track. But once you practice, it activates both hemispheres of the brain. So,
Sir, in 10 seconds, we have to do that.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
Sir, may we make use of both the hands, or should it be done only by one hand?
I can just show this. So you just keep these fingers and then switch it. So these kind of small exercises can stimulate both the hemispheres of the brain.
So how long should we practice this daily?
So initially, when you get into the track, then it becomes much easier. So initial practice takes a little bit, and then it becomes easier, because once that network, this is an example to show that once that network gets established in the brain, this exercise becomes very easy. Just like initially it is difficult to ride a bicycle or to learn swimming, but when you practice those things regularly, you can easily do that. But this stimulates both parts of your brain, both hemispheres of the brain. So now we move to the metaplasticity. So metaplasticity means activity-oriented stimulation of brain functions. So there are various techniques to improve the like synaptic plasticity. So there are few things that you have to keep in mind which are really important. So proper sleep, stress reduction, socialization, mental stimulation, nutrition, physical activity, and creativity. These are some of the few examples. So we will just go through few of them because of the time constraints. So why we consider stress as really harmful for the brain? Because mild stress is really good for our day-to-day performance. But when it affects your day-to-day activities, the stress starts to form these like complicated networks in the brain, which makes you more anxious, and which can in turn lead to depression. So if it is affecting your day-to-day activities, if the stress is affecting the day-to-day activities, you have to really take care of that, because that can lead to any kind of diseases. So you can see how the stress affects our brain. So here I have an image of this. These are two neuronal branches. So you can see black-headed projections from the axons or the neuronal projections. So those are called the spines. So here, actually, the memory proteins are stored. So we call these dendritic spines, which are really important for the memory consolidation as well as the long-term memory storage. So in the stressed brain, you can see below, there is a considerable loss of these dendritic spines. And here in the middle, you can see that the neuronal branches also gets reduced in the stressful condition. Similarly, there is also loss of neurons. So loss of new neurons which is part of the neurogenic niche, also gets affected when you are considerably stressed. And in addition, you can also see that stress shrinks the brain network. So here under normal condition, you will see that there are a lot of branches for the neuron. But when you are overly stressed, the neural network gets affected and the branchings also gets reduced. And you can also see the optimal functioning of the brain. So when you are continuously stressed out, the neural activity or the optimal functioning gets reduced and it gets into certain parts of the brain. So when you are emotionally overactive, there are areas in the brain called amygdala, which is controlling your emotions, which gets activated, which blocks the retrieval of memory from the cortex. So when you are attending an interview or similar situation, when you are overly stressed, due to the overactivation of amygdala, the signals from or whatever information that you have already studied and kept in the long-term memory storage area, which is the cortex, you are not able to retrieve because the signals from amygdala mask the retrieval process and it is not able to reach the hippocampus for as a working memory. So you are not able to properly collect the information from long-term storage area when you are overly stressed. So there are various stress reducing exercise that we can practice. So a regular exercise is really beneficial. So I am going to talk about those in the later slides. So other things are yoga, meditation, then learning to play a new instrument and learning new languages, then challenging brain activities. So you have to give the brain new activities every time so that new networks are created. And then there is also learning new subject that you really don't know. All those stimulations. And also, as I discussed, like hand gesture experiment. Similar to that, you can also juggle a ball or any other small objects which can be practiced at a stressful condition. So when you are practicing these kind of techniques, there is a huge network that's created and that will channelize the stress. So you can really see that when you get into stressful conditions, when you are practicing these things, the stress won't affect you because you are easily able to channelize all those informations. So why exercise is really important? So exercise shown to, there are several studies which are shown to increase the synaptic strength. So there is increased release of neurotransmitters. There is increase of the receptors that are present in the postsynaptic neuron gets increased. Then dendritic spine formation that I showed. When you are stressed out, the dendritic spine formation gets reduced. But when you are continuously practicing exercise, that dendritic spine gets strengthened. And then there is also various good molecules for the brain, which gets increased, like the trophic factors and the blood flow to the brain. Overall blood flow as well as cerebrospinal fluid which circulates the brain also circulates in a much better way. So all the toxins from the brain are easily cleared. And it also increases neurogenesis and overall metabolism, and the immune system as a whole gets increased in the brain. So if there is some infections, the immune system is able to reach different parts of the brain and it is able to clear those bacteria or viruses. So exercise is really important for the brain health. So in turn, it affects several different regions which are important for coordination and memory. And overall, all the brain processes gets improved when you are regularly exercising. So I mean regular exercise, not once in a while exercise. So regular exercise increases all these functionalities of the brain, including the motor, cognition, and it also elevates your mood and motivation. So in this experiment, it was done at University of Illinois. Just if you are not able to do regular exercise or by going to a gym or at your home, you can just walk for 20 minutes. So minimum 15 to 20 minutes exercise, like just walking, have been shown to stimulate several brain areas. This was done in students just before exam. So they could see that there was a lot of activated areas in the brain when they were asked to walk for 20 minutes compared to the group that was just sitting quietly. So if you can't include hard exercises, just include 20 minutes of walking in your day-to-day schedule. And how the meditation improves. So meditation has been shown to increase the thickness of cortex and also have been shown to activate the hippocampal network. So this was also shown to increase the wiring. So after meditation, you will see that the stressful signals got continuously reduced. So here in the lower picture, you can see that the brain activity is a lot more before meditation, but after meditation, the brain becomes more calmer and you are able to receive a lot of information. So there won't be any clash of informations in the hippocampus. So easily you can get focused. That's the main advantage of practicing meditation. And it also improves the storage of long-term memory because the cortex density has been shown to increase in thickness. And another important thing for brain health, that's one of the most important aspect of brain health and to reduce stress. So that is sleep. So we might think that during sleep, brain is at rest. But during sleep, brain is really working. So here you can see a study which was in one of the reports which came, which showed that in the Alzheimer's patients, the plaque density or the aggregates that are formed in Alzheimer's brain or the people who are suffering from Alzheimer's, when they were allowed to practice or when they were allowed to sleep at a proper interval, that was similar to the NUN study. So they could see that there was detoxification of brain. There were a lot of toxins were removed as well as the brain was functioning at a much better level when they got a regular sleep. So sleep has also been shown to improve the recollection, word recollection, or the retrieval of information is much better when you get proper sleep. So there is also it is also dependent on the brain waves. So you might be familiar with different brain waves like beta, alpha, gamma, theta and delta. So generally when we are in day-to-day activities, which is the brain wave that is predominant, do anyone know? So during the regular day-to-day activities, mostly we have beta waves. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so during regular day-to-day activities, we have predominantly beta waves. And when we are practicing meditation and all, there are a lot of alpha wave generation, which makes our system more calmer. So beta waves are more agitative waves, and during that time, there is more stressful activities can take place. When you practice meditation, there is conversion of beta wave to alpha wave, and alpha waves makes your brain more calmer. And during sleep, there is transition from beta to alpha during the initial stages of sleep, and during the later stages, there is more theta waves, and during really deep sleep, you get more of delta waves. So delta waves are really calm waves, and during this stage, during the theta and delta stage, more consolidation of memory happens. So we ask many of the, when we give classes to various students as well as in community, we ask them to practice like techniques. Like if you want to remember something, just you can practice by reading it before sleep. And many people do this when they are doing presentations and all. They just go through the slides before the sleep, and they are able to recollect much better, or they are able to retain most of the information from the slide when they wake up in the morning if they get a proper sleep. So most of the memory consolidation happens during sleep. And during that deep sleep, we have mostly delta waves. And you have to get all these waves properly for getting a sound sleep. So if you are not getting enough sleep, the consolidation gets affected, and overall brain health also get affected, because during this period all the neurotransmitters, and when you are active during the day, there will be a lot of neurotransmitters that will be released in the synapses. And during the day, after all these activities, when you go to sleep, there will be a lot of neurotransmitters which are left in the synaptic clefts gets recycled. And this recycling process is done by supporting cells in the brain. And this recycled neurotransmitters gets again into the system. So if the recycling process doesn't happen, all these neurotransmitters and several proteins that are present in the brain gets aggregated. And these aggregates are seen mostly in the case of Alzheimer's or Parkinson brain. So this aggregation is mainly, one of the main reason for this aggregation is the lack of proper sleep. So when we analyze brain samples of people who have suffered from neurodegenerative condition, or we see that this plaque formation is much higher. And also when we discuss with them, during their preliminary stages, they get sleep deprivation. So one of the major thing that they show in the initial stages is the sleep deprivation. So sleep deprivation leads to more aggregates in the brain, which can fasten the process of neurodegeneration. So sleep is very important for the brain health, and also for reducing stress and anxiety or stress related disorders. So another important thing that you can also practice is like doing some hobbies or extracurricular activities. So here you can see the video of Albert Einstein. So I might, my audio won't be clear, but you can just see the video. After that, we can discuss. So in Einstein's brain, there was an additional expansion in the parietal lobe, which was seen. So this additional U-like extension, in this video, they are talking about that U-like extension and how it was developed in Einstein's brain. Okay, this was one of the quotes from Einstein. So he told that the theory of relativity occurred to him by intuition, and music was one of the driving force behind this intuition. So you can see how the brain changes when you're practicing a instrument, or you can practice any different hobbies. So based on that, your brain changes. So here, by playing that string instrument, even in that kids, you saw that kids playing the music. So by just 15 months of practice, they got almost similar brain pattern, or that U-shape structure similar to that of Einstein's brain. So you can really like make the changes in the brain when you're practicing this kind of musical instruments, as well as listening to the music also improves your neuroplasticity. So these are some of the techniques by which we can improve neuroplasticity. So sleep, as I discussed, is one of the most important thing for brain health. And then you also have like nutritional foods. So fiber rich food is really important for proper brain health. So that's why like when you are having mostly Western diets which are lacking fiber contents, then you will see that it affects the brain development, as well as the free radical scavenging, which are done by antioxidants. So antioxidant rich food is really important. Antioxidant plus fiber rich food is really good tonic for brain. And also practicing stress reducing techniques. So you can practice any instruments or practice some other hobbies, or another thing to reduce stress is socialization, which is difficult in this corona condition. So due to physical distancing, we are not able to interact with our friends. That's really affecting our brain. But for that, we have to replace with some other techniques. So you can stay at home and practice some other hobbies, which will additionally give you those kind of plasticity, which you are lacking due to socialization. And there are several mental stimulation exercises. So I just showed a few mental exercises, but you can, I can show several other experiments which can stimulate your brain. At least practicing like new things. You can learn new languages, or practicing new hobbies, or creating new things. So even you can cook new dishes, or new hobbies like stitching, or like if you are interested in having sports, practice new sports as well as art related stuffs, or even you can learn dance or music, which are really good for your brain. So all these new activities creates a new network in the brain, and those network will help you when you are in stressful condition. So that is the basic concept of neuroplasticity. So you have to establish new networks in the brain, which is really important in a stressful condition. So that just I am giving a example for quickly relieving stress. So just imagine that you are attending an interview. So there will be a lot of firing from amygdala that I discussed. So which is preventing the retrieval of long-term memory from the cortex to the hippocampus. So when you are emotionally active, there is strong signals from amygdala. So one thing that you can do easily is to write your emotions. So just take a piece of paper and write whatever emotions comes into your brain. And that has been shown to be very effective to break that cycle of amygdala firing. So when the amygdala firing goes down, you are easily able to retrieve the informations from long-term memory, which is the cortex. So another thing is to practice deep breathing. So deep breathing also can improve improve the oxygen level in your brain. And during this COVID situation, getting good oxygen is really important. When you are keeping the mask, at least you have to practice breathing really well when you are not keeping the mask, or you have to practice exercises, yoga exercises like pranayama, which stimulates your brain cells. So there will be a lot of oxygenated blood that will be reaching the brain. And then physical activities like exercise also can stimulate the brain activity. So these were the brief outline regarding what are techniques that you can do. There are several more. Due to lack of time, I am just skipping other slides or other activities. So just giving a brief about the Center for Neuroscience at CUSAT, because we have different areas of research like the developmental neuroscience, gut-brain interaction, because now we have several like studies coming out regarding the interaction of gut and brain. So when you are eating fiber-rich food, you are not just improving the your gut health, but also you are enriching for more healthy bacteria. And those bacteria are really important for maintaining a good, healthy gut. And this gut health is really important for your brain as well, because now we have seen that there are several neurotransmitters that are released from the gut. So almost 90% of serotonin is released from gut, and 50% of dopamine is released from the gut. So your relaxing feeling, which is given by the serotonin, and your pleasure feeling, which is given by dopamine, are also controlled by the activities that are going on in the gut. So bacteria in your gut is really important for your good mood. So we are also studying several aspects of gut-brain interaction. Then we have studies on neurodegenerations like Parkinson, Alzheimer's. And we are also incorporating neuromechanics in collaboration with startup units in CUSAT, where we can intervene at the later stages of neurodegeneration to can like improve their neuroplasticity, and in turn their day-to-day activities can also get beneficial, or when their plasticity increases, even for Parkinson or stroke related issues, they are able to coordinate their muscles in much better way. So that's like a neuro rehabilitation research that we are taken up with in collaboration with startups at CUSAT. So they are mostly engineers, and they are collaborating with us for brain health. So then neuroregeneration and neuroplasticity, which I discussed, and all this information we are conveying to the public through a platform that we created called Prajna. So Prajna is the like a platform where we update the society, or we give information to the society regarding brain health. So that's like a platform where we bridge science and society, because there are a lot of research happening in the field of neuroscience, and many of this research do not reach the public. So in this Prajna platform, we are trying to deliver this knowledge to the public. And I hope I have conveyed some of the informations regarding the different aspects of neuroscience with my limited knowledge, because neuroscience is such a vast subject, and you all, as I know, will be curious to know more about the different aspects of brain as well as brain health. So I would expect some questions. Okay, so I just stop here. Thank you.
Sir, I have some questions in the chat box. I'll read it out. So we have one from Saloni Dhal. Is there a correlation between high use of social media or phones with having anxiety, loss of concentration, etc.?
Okay, so there are two aspects which I forgot to discuss when you are using continuously these digital platforms. So one is regarding the disturbance in sleep pattern that can happen. So when you're exposed to blue light continuously during evening, so generally for our brain health, proper sleep is required. And for initiating proper sleep, one of the hormone that's important is melatonin. And melatonin, somebody has to unmute. Somebody has to mute the phone. Sort of. Okay. Okay, so during evening, we have a lot of red light, and red light after 6 o'clock, the melatonin level increases, and melatonin peaks by 10, and after 12, it goes down. So that's the time period our body has programmed for getting sleep. So when we are looking at these blue screens, so blue light inhibits the secretion of melatonin. So during our neuroscience lectures, what we really asked our students as well as those who listen to these talks to at least move away from digital screens 1 hour before sleep. Because when you are looking at the screen, there is more blue light which inhibits this melatonin hormone, which affects your proper sleep. So you won't get enough deep sleep when the melatonin level goes down. And the other aspect is when you are like flooded with lot of informations, so your concentration level goes down. So for that, you have to practice mindfulness, or whatever you are doing, you have to completely get involved. So that is one of the important aspect of this neuroplasticity. So to increase concentration. But when you are exposed to a lot of information at a time, by just Googling, you get you are flooded with information. And when you are flooded with information, lot of information goes to your short-term memory, but then the long-term conversion doesn't happen. So most of the informations are deleted or are going to the what you call as the short-term memory, which we are not able to retrieve at future point. So for increasing concentration, you have to do one activity at a time. And by practicing regularly this mindfulness, you can improve the concentration level, and your brain capacity also increases. That is really important to reduce stress as well as anxiety, because this stress and anxiety are also dependent on your brain programming. So when it is flooded with information and you are not able to retrieve those informations properly after consolidation, then you get stressed out. As well as the brain is not in a relaxed mode when you are giving lot of information at a time. So in between, you have to allow your brain to get relaxed. For that, you can practice deep breathing as well as visualizing. Visualizing is one of the very important technique that you can practice. By visualizing positive thoughts in your brain, you are giving lot of good molecules for the brain, which makes the brain much more relaxed. So in between, you have to practice this to increase the sharpness as well as to increase the focus, which can in turn reduce stress and anxiety.
Moving on to the next question, how much time, it's from Benny Paul, how much time we have to practice the finger exercise?
Okay, so initially, it is really difficult to get into that neural network. But once you get into that stronger network, then it is much easier. You can just practice for 30 seconds. 30 seconds, that is enough to stimulate both hemispheres. And the other thing that you can all practice is also to practice writing with the left hand. If you are a right-hander, You can also practice writing with left hand so that the connections in the right brain also get activated. So these are exercises that you can do for stimulating both parts of the brain.
Yeah, so moving on to the next question. Why is it easy to lose a habit?
Why is it difficult to lose a habit?
It says why it is easy to lose a habit. So I don't know, maybe.
Okay, generally once you form a habit, it forms a strong network in the brain. So it is not easy to lose that habit. And if you want to develop a new habit, you have to carve a new pathway. And for carving new pathway, you need to continuously stimulate with those thoughts. So if you just imagine somebody has a habit of gossiping, so that will come automatically when you are in a group. But when you deliberately practice positive affirmations and positive thoughts, slowly a network is formed. Initially, it will be very difficult to control those emotions, but when you practice that with your willpower, gradually those additional networks will be formed, and which will help you to become a better personality.
Sir, is there any relationship between sleep, stress, and skin allergy?
So there are sleep can cause lot of issues in the body. So including lot of bodily changes, because there will be lot of cortisol secretion, as well as your body heat also rises the next day if you are lacking sleep. So that can affect the overall skin health, as well as many other issues can also happen, including your immune system goes down. So
Thank you, sir.
So the next question is from Shalini Vasudevan. Is there a connection between emotion regulation and procedural memory? Why do we give more importance to episodic memories?
Okay, so the first part was,
why do we forget things easily? Is there a connection between emotion regulation and procedural memory? Is the first part, and why do we give more importance to episodic memories?
Okay, so generally when you are emotionally active, even if when you are continuously activated under stressful condition, or when you are emotionally active, the normal pathway of this procedure memory will be there, because amygdala overfiring mainly affects the long-term memory storage from the from the cortex to the hippocampus. So when you are continuously having this procedural memory, those pathways will be already there, because those are not really affected by the amygdala overfiring. So emotional aspects doesn't really affect the procedural memory which have been stored in the brain, which has been stored as a strong network, because you are continuously practicing that, and you are easily able to retrieve those. But when you are having this like a situation where you are attending an interview, where you are retrieving lot of new informations which you need when the questions are asked by the interviewer, you need sudden response from the long-term memory storage area, which is the cortex, and you have to bring those informations to the working memory. So this kind of emotional overfiring can affect that cycle. So you are not easily able to retrieve this information. So there will be masking of information from the long-term to the working memory.
Okay. So the next question is from Hima Sebastian. Why do we forget things easily, even the simple things, as in they are on the tip of our tongue? Does this have a link to the neural degeneration?
So it's not due to the neural degeneration, but there are a lot of things which we are not focusing on, because our short-term memory will be having lot of information to process. So we have to properly have this memory consolidation. Though if the memory consolidation is not proper, when we are trying to retrieve, there will be a lot of confusing informations coming in. So that's why when we ask the students to practice some of these consolidation techniques, you have to have this visualization, or you have to involve more than one senses to code those memory. So there is linguistic coding, there is visual coding, and there is coding. So when more than one or two coding methods are used, then that becomes a stronger memory. And those informations are easy to retrieve. So it doesn't, it is mainly due to the not proper coding rather than neurodegeneration.
Moving on to the next question. It's from NOFL. I think it's a screen name, so I'm not going to read the name. But will the new networks get into a condition where they may fade due to inadequate usage? Is there a limit to formation of neural networks? That is, will there be a saturation point?
So the saturation point is something unimaginable. So you don't need to worry about those, because when you are creating new networks, the old network which was there gets slowly diminished and it goes to the trace memory. So new network becomes dominant, and that will be your new character. So that's a process where you are strongly influencing a new thing, and the other goes down. So there will be, every time there will be new creations.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question, it's from Krishna Priya. Is there a correlation between stress or depression and appetite?
So there is a strong link between stress, because during the stressful events, there is a release of cortisol, which also affects your digestion. So under this stressful condition, due to the elevated level of cortisol, your digestive mechanism also goes down. So there is this strong link between stress and your digestive capacity.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
One more question. Sir, can we erase the neural network, or we can shift, or we can abandon some particular negative networks, or how we can manage that one? Example, some kind of network creating obsessive, continuous, same repetition of thoughts.
So you can definitely reduce those stronger networks. So the only thing is that you have to practice continuously. First thing, you have to habitually practice this. So first thing that you have to do is you have to analyze what are the negative things that you want to remove from your system. So that's the first step. And that should be sufficiently reinforced with a new thought, or the new character, new behavior that you want to get into the network. And then you have to think forward and feed more and more informations. So by feeding more and more these kind of positive thoughts, you are getting this pathway more and more, or you are building more strength to this pathway. And gradually the other pathway goes down. So the most important thing is you have to act upon it.
Fine. Sir, moving on to the next question, there are a couple of things which I'm clubbing together from Vinu and Rita, because those are related. Is there a time for sleeping? What about the effect of late night sleep? And does night sleep deprivation of professionals cause any neural degeneration? So these are the two parts of the question. So an ideal time for sleeping, and does night sleep deprivation of professionals cause any neural degeneration?
Actually, our brain is, we have a, our brain follows our biological clock.
Meeting the
So, biological clock happens due to the sunlight availability as well as the night times. So, that is also dependent on the melatonin secretion that I discussed. So when sunset happens, the melatonin, there is more red light in the surrounding. So red light actually stimulates melatonin secretion. And due to more red light in the surrounding, our melatonin level peaks. And then by around 10 to between 10 and 12, melatonin will be high. So that's the time when we need to sleep according to our body clock. And then when the morning early sunlight comes in, there will be more blue light. So blue light will inhibit the level of melatonin. And we goes into this wake cycle. So this is how the body is programmed. And if you are disturbing this pattern, there is more chance that you are skipping some of the different stages of sleep. So there is rapid eye movement sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. And during all these different stages of sleep, there are different wave patterns that are seen. So if you are not reaching the theta and delta wave pattern, then the problem is that your deep sleep gets affected. And most of the memory consolidation and clearing of waste happens in the brain during this deep sleep. So when you are missing this deep sleep, there is more chance that the brain health is affected. And like if it is a continuous process, there is more chance that the degeneration also can happen. But always when we take classes in schools, kids ask us stages of life. But you have to imagine that we have 100 billion neurons. So the degeneration starts at very early stage due to our like torturing of our brain. But the result is shown during the late stages because it takes around 100 billion neurons to get degeneration. And when it reaches the 50% or 60% stage, the symptoms appear. So maybe I might be in the 30% stage of neurodegeneration. And if I am practicing these good habits, just like what we discussed in that nun study, then whatever left can form additional synapses and that can improve the capacity. So neuroplasticity can be triggered at any stage of the life. But only thing is that you have to practice such good health habits for the brain.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question from Hima. You mentioned about consolidation of memories. Could you share some of these techniques?
Okay, so there are several techniques for proper consolidation. Like you can categorize things when you learn. So if you are given 20 different words, or when you are just going to supermarket, when you are having 20 different stuffs, you can just categorize them according to their use. Like you can categorize them as laundry, then you can categorize them as food or vegetables, and then as other groceries. So just by categorizing and teaching the brain, so you are able to remember all these 20 things. And then there is practicing of involvement of more than one senses. So when I am talking to you, you are having visual information and auditory information. But when you are just writing down the short points and then recollecting those points after the talk, that gets consolidated in the memory. So involve more than two senses. So visualization, then you can also do the auditory as well as linguistic coding. So when these three coding happens together, there is more stronger memory consolidation. And the other things are like practicing just visualization. So if you are just reading through a article or reading to a chapter of a lesson, so after each paragraph, try to visualize whatever you have read in the brain, read in the paragraph, and try to like imagine those things that it is happening in the real life. So just by rehearsing everything that you have read, that gets stronger information. Though for brain it is easier to have this visual clues. So visual information gets strongly stored in the brain than any other stimuli. So try to visualize and try to do involve more than two senses, and also learn by categorizing. And then there are other several techniques that I can discuss maybe later, or you can just email me because it will take a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, sir. So it's my duty.
Sir, can you please explain long-time potentiation, LLT?
So I think
Okay.
we are already.
Okay, a long-term potentiation is that stronger input after when we are stimulating a neuron, lot of proteins are secreted, which are important for the memory consolidation. So we can measure this change in the memory proteins by this long-term potentiation. So it is like a measuring of how that neuron gets this information. So that is in simple terms, but you can just explain by more neurological terms, but I just made it very simple.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Does hearing or telling stories really help our neuroplasticity?
Okay, so when you are hearing something, you are like making them visualize. So it's very good for the child's development when you are slowly narrating a story and all, because they are made to visualize things rather than bombarding lot of information together. In the case of mobile phones, by just tracking for them to track those information is very difficult. But when you are narrating a story, they are able to visualize the things that are happening, and that will be getting consolidated as a stronger memory. That's why we still remember a lot of stories that our grandparents used to tell us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So with that, we come to the end of the session. So it's also my duty to propose a vote of thanks.
Can I just take 1 minute?
Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
So there are all these techniques that we discussed today are to improve the total brain health. So improving brain health is really important for like your own health as well as for developing a better society. So what we propose to you all is just practice and see the difference. And when you practice, you will see that there is a lot of improvement, and your memory level increases, your overall health increases, your immune system builds up, and your personality itself will change. So the basic ideology is that you should be the change that you want to see in the society. So first you have to correct yourself, and that will slowly reflect in the family, and slowly family will change the society, and society will change the nation. So with that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir. It's also my duty. We come to the end of the session.
Thank you so
duty
much.
to propose a vote of thanks. May I request everyone to kindly mute their microphones, please. So it was a wonderful session. Sir provided us a bird's eye view of the concept of neuroplasticity within the time constraints that he had, along with the factors that can affect neuroplasticity. Can I please request everyone else to kindly mute their microphones?
ഉവ്വ് അപ്പോൾ ഒരു 6 മണിക്ക് ഇവിടെ എത്തത്തക്ക വിധത്തിൽ വന്ന് 6 മണിക്കല്ല 5:30 ശേഷം ഇറങ്ങിക്കുന്നത്.
Excuse me. Yeah.
അതെ 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 കുറച്ചുകൂടെ പോകാനും ഉണ്ടല്ലോ.
I think it is Mr. Naufal Yusuf who is person unmuted.
Yeah, Mr.
Please mute your mic
Yusuf.
and talk over phone.
And also some of the exercises that we had been run through by sir for stimulating the mental muscles basically, and then we had this final question answer session, and also I thank all the participants for joining this session and making this particular knowledge forum session on this contemporary topic which is very relevant to be a success. And thanks Chakrapani sir for accepting our invitation and delivering a talk on this topic. Thank you all. So we will resume in the next year from January, and then I'll share the details of the talk and the topic in due time. So signing off. Thanks all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chakrapani sir.